Thank you for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here to talk about some very high-level ideas of my research about this automated network construction from Massive Text Corpora. And this is Jingbo Shang. I'm assistant professor at Computer Science Department and Halujulu Data Science Institute at UC San Diego. And we are going to cover a few components, and also I will briefly talk about some of my ongoing work. And I will try to talk about all these things without any formula. So hopefully it will be friendly to everyone here. And feel free to interrupt me if you need any clarification during the talk. And just want to double check, we are supposed to have a talk for 1 hour also, right?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So, and that'll leave a little bit of time for discussion afterwards. Okay. We are recording this. So if you're familiar with Zoom, everyone, your likeness will show. If you do not want that, you can turn off your camera. If you don't have a microphone that works, you can also post a question in chat, and I will monitor the chat for the speaker.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so then I will move on, and I will time myself and make sure everyone received the message well. Okay, so. As we all know that we are now in the big data era, and every second we are generating tons of data. For example, if you are here in this talk, we're generating the data in the forms of the audio, video, picture, and the text. So it is very important to analyze and understand such a big data and then organize them into some structured knowledge and insights. This goal has been pursued by generations of data mining researchers, and there are many data mining methods that focusing on extracting the insights and the knowledge from this structured or semi-structured data. This type of the data includes networks, graphs, charts, tables. These are ones you can name, and many Kaggle competitions you can see a CSV file as an input. That's kind of a table. It's already semi-structured. You know the meaning of each column. They are all well organized. But on the other hand, there are many unstructured data, and most of them are actually text data. They are here waiting for us to do some more analysis. So where are these text data? Text data is everywhere in our daily life. If you look at all these examples, you will find that news articles, social media posts, business and finance reports, scientific papers, medical records, they are all about text data. The volume itself is already massive, but more importantly, it keeps growing. So this is really important and difficult task, and it's very hard for human expert to read through all these articles, understand what's going on, and distill the knowledge, because every day you can imagine that there are thousands or even more new scientific papers going out, and for those kind of state-of-the-art knowledge, you need to recruit a large number of experts. Even you have the access to this huge amount of talents, the cost could be expensive. So this becomes a necessity to develop automated models to let the machine digest this information in an efficient and effective way. So here is our goal. In AutoNet, we want to develop a series of automated models to turn unstructured text data into structured knowledge and insights. There are many traditional methods from the NLP community, but they rely on some extensive annotations from the domain experts. I will show you some example later how this annotation look like, but you can imagine that this annotation process itself is time consuming and also expensive, especially in specific domains. For example, if you want to annotate those business reports, then very likely you need to hire some MBA people, then they can read this report, do some annotation. So it could be more expensive than those general annotation you can see from those Mechanical Turk from Amazon. And my AutoNet framework here aims for an automatic way. The automatic here means we are only using the public knowledge base. We are not using any additional expert effort other than this. So we will see how can we approach this problem. In the end of the talk, we will also explore something more automatic, like we even don't need this public knowledge base. Okay. So this idea is kind of, we want to do this structuring, right? We want to turn the text into structured network. And why is it structured network? Because we identify that the structuring is a key, and the network is a nice intermediate form for this knowledge and insights. You may heard a term called a knowledge graph in the past. In this knowledge graph, it's kind of a network. Every node is a typed entity. It could be a person, could be an organization, location, events, time, all these things. And the edges here will describe their relationship. So this network structure is so flexible, it can store this heterogeneous structured information from sophisticated semantics. So as I mentioned earlier, you can also see many data mining methods already developed for the structured data. So once we turn this unstructured text data into the structured network, you can easily apply most of existing structured analysis on this constructed network for further knowledge discovery. So that's why we end up with this network as kind of the major outcome that we want. So in this AutoNet framework, as Ted mentioned, there must be a few components. Yes, we have 4 components here. So this is slightly different from the NLP-based method. We are working on massive text data as an input instead of looking at single document or single sentence. We aim to extract structured knowledge and insights from this raw text in an automatic way. There are 4 major components here: phrase mining, entity recognition, relation extraction, and a taxonomy construction. And I have developed a few methods for each component here, like this AutoPhrase, AutoNER, Remind, and NetTaxo. Well, I forgot to change this. It's already accepted in a conference in 2020. So we will cover that later. So let's walk you through this framework and see what is the example that we can have. So suppose we're looking at all these computer science research papers. They are mostly focusing on computer science here. We are familiar with data science to some extent here, so we will try to use this as an example. And we can still use a Wikipedia for this because there will be some overlap between this CS corpus and Wikipedia. Okay. So with the help of the Wikipedia, we will first find these phrases. They are keywords or multi-words phrases here in this corpus, in these documents. So some example could be data mining, machine learning, information retrieval, support vector machine. These are some possible phrases we can extract from these documents. And in the second step, based on the phrases, we are going to further distinguish the types. Maybe we want to recognize the person names, we want to understand the location names, but in this example, we are going to figure out maybe what are the problems in computer science, what are the methods you can use to solve these problems. So we will identify support vector machine and the logistical regression as 2 methods, binary classification as a problem. So these entity types are predefined, but it really depends on the domain you're looking at, and you can change this in a flexible way. So with all these entities phrases, we can further develop a relation extraction method, try to connect this entity as nodes using the edges, using the relations as edges. So here we can expect some results like after reading all these documents, we realize that this SVM and the logistical regression, they can both solve the binary classification problem, and these 2 could be the baseline of each other. They can compare with each other. So you can use a phrase to describe the relation as well. So that's why it will be a very flexible schema for you to store the knowledge. But later, you will realize if we are turning a massive amount of text data into a network, this network is very likely huge as well. There will be millions of nodes and even billions of edges. So it's also hard for people to look at this information, edge by edge or node by node. So we introduce this topic taxonomy to help us to further organize this in a better shape that we can navigate. Just like we are in a library and we want to find the right topic. So how can we look at this? So we come up with topic taxonomy. Every node here is a set of coherent terms describing some concepts. And you can use this topic taxonomy to efficiently navigate to the specific subnetwork that you're interested in. This also gives you, this will also present you very high-level summary about the whole network. What are the information here? You can see we can have computer vision, machine learning, data mining, natural language, these things here. So without looking at these documents one by one, you have an idea about how it look like, what are the topics there in this set of the documents. So all this, and you can distill a knowledge like this. So it gives you another layer of an abstraction. So all these components form the AutoNet framework. And let me show you some, let's talk about the key features before I show you more example. So compared with those NLP-based methods, our AutoNet here uses only public knowledge base and a massive text corpus as input. It can extract structures without any additional human effort. As a result, it can be easily applied to different domains. Let me give you more application examples in different domains. So we have seen some example using the computer science paper. So why not we can look at some biomedical papers? Yes, we can follow the PubMed database. We can get all these titles, abstract, full text for those biomedical papers. And we probably want to replace the Wikipedia by a new knowledge base called mesh term, because for biomedical ones, you need more domain-specific terminologies, which somehow beyond the Wikipedia scope. And with all these things, we can extract the knowledge and insights that could be useful for healthcare application. And we can also look at the news articles from this New York Times and use the Wikipedia again to figure out what are the persons, where are the locations, and what are their relationships, something like this. And maybe we can derive some application for social science. If we apply the AutoNet to the Yelp review together with a list of dish names as a supervision, we can recognize all the dishes from this restaurant, and we can provide a stronger recommendation based on what are the most famous dish for each restaurant. You can look at the reviews, combine the polarity scores, and try to derive some new recommendation system. If we apply this AutoNet to the Yahoo Finance, and at the same time, we replace the knowledge base by the Investopedia, which is kind of the Wikipedia in the finance domain. The extracted structure information can provide useful signals for automated trading model. So as you can see here, our AutoNet framework can be applied in many domain-specific applications quickly because it only requires a public knowledge base without much additional expert effort. You don't need to re-annotate a new training corpus. You just need to borrow the right existing knowledge base plus massive amount of the document. The massive is very important here. We are going to leverage the statistical signals very soon and to see how it can improve or help us to recognize all this phrase, entity, and relation information without extensive annotation from human. Okay, so this is kind of the overview, and we are going to talk about two pieces of work here. The first one is about the phrase mining. We will start with some existing popular work or classical work, and then we will move on to a more automated method. The second one will be focused on the last step for the taxonomy construction. I will give you some brief introduction for the entity recognition and the relation extraction. But for those two, it requires more deep understanding for neural networks. So I will just skip them for details here. And in the end, I will conclude the talk by talking about some ongoing work and showing you that in the near future, we can expect there could be some method. They are even unsupervised without help of the knowledge base. As long as you have a significant number of documents, say you have 100,000 documents or maybe more than 1 million documents, we can do these extractions without any help. All the information are already embedded in the document itself. Okay, so let me first start with this phrase mining. And the first question is first, why do we need phrase mining? Let me walk you through an example. So suppose we are looking at the news articles, we're doing some analysis, and we randomly picked a date. This date, of course, it's not random. It's not a real random date. I picked that for some purpose, but you can imagine this is a random date. Okay, so this is April 9th, 2017. And before the phrase mining, what we have in these articles are just unigrams, right? So one of the straightforward way we can do is we can do some counting. We can count how many times this unigram appeared in today's, today is this April 9th, 2017. From all these news articles, we can do the counting. Then the straightforward solution here is we can plot a word cloud. And this is the word cloud I got from this unigram counting. And there are many interesting keywords here. If you look at this word cloud, at the top left corner, you can have a word called united. In the middle towards a little bit like a bottom left, you have a word DAO. So you may wonder now, what are their meanings? Is this United States? Is that UPS? Or maybe United Airline or many other things. In US, United is really ambiguous if you only look at this unigram. And if you look at this style, if you are familiar with some of the things, it could be a person name, it could be a place, it could be some mysterious Asian symbol that you just don't know. So it's ambiguous if you look at this word cloud. But what if we have the phrase mining? Instead of single words, we can now count the frequency of the phrases, and then we can plot a phrase cloud. Now it's quite clear that United actually means United Airlines in these days news articles, and this DAO is David DAO, and it's clearly a person. So you can immediately understand that all these phrases are actually talking about the well-known United Airlines incident. The security guards punched a passenger, David Dow, at the ORD, the O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Well, I did my PhD study in Illinois, so this event is very well-known in our neighborhood. So I hope it's still well-known in California. And you can refer to this United Express flight 3411 incident, and you will see many things talking about this. So from this example, we can see that the phrase mining is a keystone towards text understanding. Without these phrases, without knowing these a few unigrams, they are actually getting together, forming a phrase. It's hard for you to understand their semantics. The phrase mining can clearly benefit a lot of downstream applications in NLP, information retrieval, and text mining. For example, when we are looking at this text-based predictive analytics, you're using a bag of words model. You may have heard this bag of words term before, right? You can easily upgrade everything from word to phrase. You can use bag of phrase. When you are learning the word embedding, you can now instead train the phrase embedding. When you are indexing the search engine, you are comparing the search query. When you are calculating the similarity between the query and document, you can upgrade your analysis from the word level to phrase level, as long as you have a phrase analysis tool here. So this is kind of a very fundamental task in text mining. It can upgrade almost all your analysis to the next level. So let me step back and try to define the task a little bit more in details. So what is the quality phrase mining here? So we aim to extract a ranked list of phrases with decreasing quality from a large collection of documents. When the input mainly contains scientific papers, we can expect the output will be the terminologies. When the input is news articles, we can expect that the name of the persons, locations, and organizations will be extracted. So it's really depend on what's the input, and we want to extract all these phrases. And there are some existing NLP-based methods like the non-phrase chunking or parsing. They can do something similar, but they will rely on extensive annotations. When you are building a model for scientific papers, you will need annotations for these scientific papers. When you're building a model for news articles, we will need new annotations for this new domain. So this is really about the amount of the human effort you want to spend for a certain task. If you don't care about the time and expense, of course, feel free to do the annotation. That should give you the best performance because you have more information. But if you want to have a jump start without spending too much effort and money there, then this distantly supervised or unsupervised method will be useful with minimum amount of the human effort. So there's some pioneer work along this line, try to approach this problem in an unsupervised manner. And the key idea is very straightforward, actually. I think many of you should know there's something called normal distribution or Gaussian distribution. When we are looking at this distribution, when the value observed is quite far away from the mean, maybe 3 or 4 standard deviation away, we will say this is outlier, or we call that this event is significant. It's quite different from the usual events. So if we describe the phrase in this way, when the event is how likely these few words will get together, you can calculate how likely it is beyond the expected amount. So when we are assuming all these unigrams are generated independently, it's kind of they are generating these words linearly proportional to its frequency. We can define we can approximate the significance score alpha here by this formula. You may wonder how did we get a formula, but I think it's not the most important message here. We just want to know that there's some way to describe how rare this event is. And we can run this greedy merge algorithm from the bottom up banner. So we can look at the sentence. We try to merge every 2 adjacent unigram. If the significance score tells us is already beyond 3 or 4, then we can merge them because this is not a common event. It's a very significant one, and we want to merge these 2 words. We can repeat this process again and again until there's no 2 adjacent words or phrase that can be merged over this threshold. So in the end, we can get this segmentation for this scientific paper's title. Maybe we don't know what does that mean for Markov blanket, but if you read this, it sounds about right? Markov blanket, feature selection for support vector machine. So this sounds about right. And if we can get this as output, then we are done with the phrase mining, right? We get all the phrases and we know where they are. So this is an unsupervised method. It relies on this alpha score. So you may wonder, like, why we pick this alpha score. There are many other statistical signals that could be useful. You may heard something called point-wise mutual information, chi-square, many other things you can use. Why use this significance score? This is definitely a question we need to answer. And sometimes different signals will capture different features. So why not we can combine them together? But unfortunately, in an unsupervised way, it's really hard to combine different signals. So that's why we later proposed this SegPhrase. It's about unifying all these signals, all these possible statistical signals using a little bit human annotation. So we introduced some binary label like this. We will train a classifier, give a score to each phrase, say how likely it's a high quality phrase. 1 means it's definitely a high quality phrase, while 0 means it's a low quality one. So the labels are binary. For example, if the input is about CS papers, we will say this paper is not, it is a low quality phrase because it's a stop words like phrase. It will be everywhere in almost every paper. And experiments show it is similar. It will be a low quality phrase. Support vector machine as the name of a classification method, it's a high quality phrase. So you may wonder why this method is called SegPhrase. It's because we also have the segmentation. So we followed the idea of the TopMine, but we replaced its greedy algorithm by a dynamic programming algorithm instead. This is called a Viterbi algorithm. And we define some generative process, and we take the output from the classifier as the input to do this segmentation. So I won't go to the details, but you already know that we can get these segmentation results like this, right? And remember that we're using the statistical signals as features in the classifier, and most of them actually are built upon this frequency. So after we have this segmentation, we can actually refine the frequency. So think about what we have in the beginning when we have this raw input, when we are doing these counts. When we will count Markov here for one, Markov blanket for one, Markov blanket feature for one, blanket feature for one, any n-gram, we will increase the counter by one. But now we have these segmentation results. Why not we just count the whole phrase? We can count the Markov blanket only without over-counting the Markov itself, blanket itself, or even blanket features like feature here. So with this counting based on phrases, we can have a rectified frequency. Let me see if there's something in the chart. Yeah, so removing stop words this strategy was adopted in TopMine. But to be honest, we are not doing this because there are some very interesting phrases involving stop words. We don't want to ignore them. And yeah, all the words are valuable. You can see that if we can afford this, definitely we want to keep that. And I will show you some example with stop words there. Okay. So as a result here, with all this rectified frequency, we can actually improve the accuracy of these statistical signals. So why not we can recompute these signals again? We will have a better estimation. Then we can refine the classifier. So that's why this method is called SegPhrase. We are conducting this quality estimation and phrasal segmentation back and forth. So we want to estimate the quality and then kick off the phrasal segmentation. With the segmentation results, we can rectify the frequency and refine the quality estimations classifier. And then we can do this back and forth. So in the quality estimation, we unified the multiple statistical signals using the weak supervision we have. And I will tell you how weak it is. And for the text segmentation here, we will rectify the frequency for a more accurate estimation for the statistical signals. So how weak it is for these expert provided labels. Based on our experiments for about 1 GB raw input, 300 well-designed binary labels are probably enough. But you can see I highlighted this well-designed, so which means these labels are not easy to come up. So if you think about, if you are a domain expert, you are asked to annotate these labels. If there are only 300 ones, maybe you don't need even more than 10 minutes to do this annotation. It's quite a light effort. But how can we know which 300 phrases should we label? This is a very difficult task. Okay, how does it compare with BPE? Byte pair encoding, won't BPE accomplish tokenization and segmentation simultaneously? I'm sorry that I'm not familiar with this BPE. Is this some package or some other popular tools?
Sorry, it's just the segmenter and tokenizer used in BERT, and a lot of the transformer models use it. That's all.
Oh, you mean the BERT? BERT doesn't tell you where are the phrases. BERT even tells you what are the word pieces. So
this is just the tokenizer that finds the word pieces plus word phrases. So word pieces can include a whole phrase. Sentence pieces, they call them now. Anyway, that's my understanding, at least. If you have a large enough vocabulary, it'll capture large phrases. Yeah, so the high quality phrases, you must have some different statistics that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think it gives you I feel it's similar to those non-phrase extraction or segmenter from those NLP-based methods. And it only focuses on the phraseness itself, but without the consideration for the quality. So yeah, so let me show you how we end up with this well-designed labels for this SegPhrase. we actually go some method like the active learning perspective. We first come up with like 10 or 20 annotations. We train the model, and then we eyeball the results and find some new interesting phrases. And our choice of the phrases is also based on our experience with all these feature designs. So we like to make sure the newly introduced labels will contribute a little more to the knowledge of this classifier. So this is not an easy task, and this deviates from our automatic principle. So later on, we try to replace this effort by the knowledge base. We're using the Wikipedia here to help you to figure out how can we do this classification. But how can we accomplish this classification using Wikipedia only? So let me first show you some observation. So in the knowledge base, you can find that there are many high quality phrases. They are freely available there. You may wonder, where are these high quality phrases? For example, if you look at the Wikipedia pages, most of the titles are high quality phrases. And if you dive into details of the content, you can find those internal hyperlink within Wikipedia. So this stuff can tell you some free high quality phrases. And you can check the candidate phrases from the input raw corpus using the frequent n-gram mining or using whatever preprocessing like DPE. You can get some candidates here. And by taking the intersection, you will get a free clean pool of high quality phrases. They form your positive pool. And then you may have a question whether the knowledge base can cover all the quality phrases we need. The answer is obviously no, because they are usually incomplete. There are so many emerging terminologies are not there in the Wikipedia. So, I think I have showed some example earlier, but I'm not sure if you noticed that there's a phrase called Obama administration. But of course now this example is outdated. We should now talk about Biden administration. So there's no wiki page at all about these things, and they are all emerging phrases. When you have a new government, then this phrase will be updated. So if we look at the remaining parts in the candidate set, there should be a fairly large number of high quality phrases that we want to discover. That's why we want the phrase mining technique. Otherwise, we just do a simple string match between the corpus to the Wikipedia. There's nothing else we need to do. But there's a problem for this knowledge base setting. There's no mention about the low quality phrase in the knowledge base. We can only understand where are the high quality ones, but how can we find those low quality ones? So this becomes a problem, because when we want to train a classifier, we need both positive samples and negative samples. We only have positive samples here now, but where can we find the negative samples? So we did some further investigation. We want to figure out, we already know that within this candidate set, the rest of the candidate set, there will be a large number of phrases we are looking for. But how many of them are there? I mean, the ratio itself we are interested in, because there could be way more low quality ones. So we did some annotation, we did some sampling and do some human evaluation. And we realized that there's about 10% of these things. Yeah, we are solving this from the one class classification problem. And I'm just showing you one of the solutions here. So we realized that, okay, based on this annotation, we do have a large number of high quality phrases, but there are way more negative ones. And this is actually very intuitive. If you think about a very long high quality phrase, I can give you a terminology easily with 6 words there. There's a term called NP hard in the strong sense. So you can see there are stop words in and the there. And there are 6 words. It's a very useful term for theoretical computer science. And how many subphrase it has, because you know that the subphrase will be as frequent as this entire phrase, right? So all of them will be there in the candidate pool. So with 6 words there, if you do some combinatorial calculation, it will be like 7 choose 2 for the subphrase, right? 7 choose 2 is kind of 30 something. And I believe many of them are not of high quality. So you can tell this 10%-ish is something you can expect, because when you have a long enough quality phrase, you actually introduce the way more negative ones there. So all these things makes this negative sampling possible. We can randomly select some negative samples from this candidate pool, the rest of the candidate pool, and to train the classifier. And then we can use this idea, we call this distance supervision, because Wikipedia is not designed for this phrase mining task. We borrowed that from a faraway place to get these things done in the phrase mining. And we can also do some ensemble learning here to denoise. And to be more specific, we can think about that. We can train a single classifier based on randomly sampled labels. We can sample a subset from the positive pool. We can sample an equal size subset from the negative pool. And we know that the error ratio will be very likely related to the noisy ratio, and it's about 10%. And ideally, if we're doing some ensembling using independent classifiers, you can tell this error will drop dramatically following this exponential way. So this is kind of the idea you can expect theoretically. But of course, in practice, it's hard to make sure all these things, they are really independent. There must be some dependency. So let's do some evaluation for the real world data set. So when we're doing the evaluation for a new task, we also need to think about what is the best way to do the evaluation. And our end objective here is to find a rank list of the phrases. So we were going to evaluate this rank list. We are going to ask the domain expert to annotate binary labels for the outcomes, say 1 for yes, 0 for no. So NP-hard in a strong is not a complete phrase. So that's why the label here is 0. And with this 0-1 sequence, we can calculate the precision and the recall at every rank. And every precision and recall becomes a dot in a precision recall curve. And you can calculate this precision recall curve for evaluation. And the area under the curve is the one we are looking at. The larger, the better. So we are mainly comparing this AutoPhrase with SegPhrase and some NLP methods with some ranking mechanism. So we are using the Stanford NLP parser as one of the baseline here to do this phrase extraction. So if you look at the results here, we evaluated all these methods on 3 domains: scientific computer science papers, Yelp business reviews, and Wikipedia articles. And you can see that in all these 3 ones, AutoPhrase performs the best here. And we also compared these methods in different language. We have this English, Spanish, and Chinese corpus. For the SegPhrase, it was originally designed for English. So we try to do some wrapping for the Spanish and the Chinese. We will translate those non-English characters using English letters and digits. So the first token, the token ID 1 will be mapped to A. Token ID 2 will be mapped to B. So these methods are data-driven ones. We really don't care about what's the surface. So we can do this conversion. And then for the Chinese ones, we introduced 2 specific baseline. One is called JBA segmentation. Another one is called ANSJ seg. They are specifically designed for Chinese. They're using extensive dictionary and some supervised model, which are pre-trained. You can see that in the very beginning, they performed very well for this Chinese phrase extraction task. But later on, this recall is kind of small. It stops very early, and we can extract way more phrases there. So this is kind of the idea. And you can see the performance gap on some other language is even more obvious. Okay, so let me show you some example about what other phrases we can get. And since the Chinese one, we have the most significant improvement. So let me show you some example here. So these are the phrases we got. The underscores are the white space inserted by the tokenizer. So in Chinese, there's no white space. And I put the translation here, and as I'm doing some computer science research, so I'm very happy to see this computer science and technology has been extracted as a phrase here. While its rank is low, but we have it here, its quality is above 0.5. Our classifier predicting a number between 0 and 1, so 0.5 is a very natural threshold to decide quality phrase. And you may wonder, like, how many phrases we have in the positive pool between the Wikipedia and the candidates. There are only less than 30,000. But if we use a 0.5 as a threshold, we can actually find more than 100,000 quality phrases here. And these are all very important phrases missed by the knowledge base. And with this phrase mining, we can recover them. And this is very important for those downstream applications if we can recognize those emerging phrases. So it has been a wide application for this phrase mining method, especially for the AutoPhrase. It has been applied in different places like this US Army Research Lab. They're using this AutoPhrase to analyze the battlefield reports. Facebook has a team about the feeds ranking to upgrade their analysis from the word level to text to phrase level to give you some better feeds when you are browsing the website. And for the TripAdvisor, they send us an email saying that they're using the AutoPhrase and SegPhrase to get the phrases from the reviews from the hotels. So they actually grouped the hotel based on the phrases. They find the Broadway show, Beacon Theater, theater shows, all these things are related to catch a show. And they also find something kind of near the High Line. It's kind of a landmark in the New York City near the Chelsea market. So this is a blog post that they are talking about this. And surprisingly, I also got an email from the International Monetary Fund. They told me that they are they want to improve the AutoPhrase for their business analytic reports things, try to upgrade the market analysis from the word level to phrase level. And we also compiled all these things together into a very small book. It's an ebook you can find online. It's called Phrase Mining from Massive Text and its Applications. And I was not quite sure about its visibility because we just work with the publisher and we put this online. And I was not quite sure about the visibility at all until I did the summer internship at a hedge fund, Two Sigma, in 2018, I think, that summer. I found my group there has purchased 2 hard copies of the book, and I'm really happy. And I guess that might be the reason that they hire me for the internship. So, yeah, so that's kind of the idea for the phrase mining. And we can move from the phrase to the typed entity. We have this AutoNER method using the raw text plus knowledge base again to get some entity recognized with the types, with the type information there. You can read the paper if you are interested. And I won't go to the details, but I like to briefly give you some understanding here. And from the entity recognition, we achieved the state-of-the-art distantly supervised performance. At that time, there are some new follow-up work right now refreshing the performance. And we can beat some strong baselines with certain expert effort. And on some data set, the performance could be very close to the supervised benchmark. And you may also wonder, like, how much annotation effort we need to outperform the AutoNER based on the Wikipedia or knowledge base only. So from some experiments on one single data set, we can tell that AutoNER is roughly the same as 300 expert annotated articles. The red curve here is the supervised performance with regard to the number of annotated articles. The blue dashed line is the performance of the AutoNER. And when you find the tipping point, the crossing point here, it's already beyond 300. So that's kind of the idea of the distantly supervised method. It can give you some jump start. And if you do have time and a budget, definitely do some annotation. It will be even better. This one has been also adopted to different places after we open sourced the code. And there's some NCBI center at NIH. They're using our AutoNet method to look at their biomedical data set because we did the experiments mainly for the bio domain, as there are extensive dictionaries available. And there's a cool tech company. It's a NYSE listed company, I think. They're using our AutoNet idea to recognize the emerging entities and further trigger some recommendations or AI-assisted functions when you are typing something using their input method. Then moving from phrases and entities, we can do some relation extraction. So the idea is that in this phrase mining and entity results, you can think about that the phrases are very likely a superset of entities, and there will be some. You can find. You can just Google my name, and you will be able to find. I think it's something like this. Or GitHub.io, I forgot, but my ID is my full name, last and first, plus some magic number there. And if you want to know what are these magic numbers, they are these are my birthday. I usually register some account using my full name, but unfortunately, someone has the same full name as mine on GitHub already, so I appended some suffix there. For this remind, it's on my collaborators GitHub, but you can tell from my website there are some publication lists. So we are actually trying to extract the phrase. We want to distinguish the phrase into entity phrase and the relation phrase. And then we can use the relation phrase together with some parsing tree structure to figure out how can we use this relational phrase to connect the two entity phrases. So that's kind of the idea. And you can check this paper if you're interested. Yeah, and thanks for getting the links, Ted. And the preliminary version of this work got the WW18 Best Poster Award runner-up. So that's kind of the idea. And combining the AutoPhrase, AutoNet, remind together, they are all using the input text plus knowledge base. We can construct this network, right? Then as this network is constructed from a massive text corpus, its size is usually gigantic, right? And we did some experiments. I run this all these pipelines on all the biomedical papers we get from the PubMed. Can you talk a little bit more about how you score quality of the system? How is metric design? So it's a little bit different. So for NER, we are looking at the F1 scores usually. Something between 0 and 1, 0 and 1. We're showing the percentage here. We are evaluating both the accuracy for the, there are two subproblems in NER. Where are these entities? What are the types? So only when you predict both the location and the type correct, we will consider that as correct. Otherwise, it will be a false positive. And you will also miss something in the annotation. That will be false negative. So then you can calculate the precision and the recall, and then you get the F1. So this is a very rigorous evaluation. So if you get the span or the type wrong, then you will get this as a false positive. And for the entity here, it's more like, for the relation here, it's a ranking task. We're using this MAP score. It's something between 0 and 1. We want to extract a rank list of the relationship for the entire corpus. And then we are evaluating the rank list just like what we did for the phrase mining ones. It's similar to the precision recall curve, but it puts slightly more weights for the first few relations. Okay, so here's an example like the network we got from all the PubMed papers. And to render this network in my Chrome browser, it took more than 40 minutes and almost made my laptop, MacBook Pro, down. So you can see here, even you look at this small portion, it's quite densely connected. There are so many nodes and edges. It's too time consuming for the human expert to browse this network node by node or edge by edge. So that's why we propose to construct a topic taxonomy for this network. So we want to better explore this. I think I may be run out of time for 10 minutes, so hopefully it's fine. So we are expecting that we are constructing a topic taxonomy like this. It's a tree-like structure. Every node represents a topic. Every topic is described by a cluster of semantically coherent terms. For example, here, if you're familiar with computer science, you can easily summarize the first node is about computer vision, second node is about machine learning, third one is about data mining, then it comes to NLP. Then under the data mining, there are a few child nodes here. And you can tell the first one is about frequent patterns and association rules. The second one is about graph mining. The third one is more related to the social network analysis. So these are something we are expecting, and we want to have this to help us to structure the network in a hierarchical way. And it can provide you a holistic summary for the corpus, and it can help you to efficiently figure out what are the subnetwork you are more interested in. So there are some recent methods using the term embedding. It's similar to the word embedding, but it works at the phrase level. So we will try to project all these words, phrases into a latent space. And then we can later conduct some top-down clustering to group them into different nodes. And if you do this in a top-down recursive manner, you will get a tree. So that's a very intuitive idea, right? But it has some limitation. So let me give you some example. There are two phrases. The first one is called frequent pattern. The second one is called transaction database. You may not know the history of these two terms. They are actually the origin of the data mining community. So in early this century or in late 90s, people are still looking at a database, not data mining. They're trying to figure out how to efficiently conduct these things. But then people start to look at the frequent patterns, whether this beer and a diaper, they are frequently appeared in the Walmart transactions. This is called frequent pattern. And that's why frequent pattern is usually appear together with this transaction database. But nowadays, I will tell you the number of topics later. So from the taxonomy perspective, we should categorize the frequent pattern into the data mining topic. If we have a term called transaction database, it's more related to database. But from the embedding perspective, for the word embedding, term embedding perspective, the embedding of these terms are decided based on the context. If the contexts are similar, these embeddings will be similar. So the frequent pattern and the transaction database, the embeddings will be very similar to each other. So that's something we don't want to see, right? We want to make sure we can figure out them into different places. So then we look at the metadata. We are looking at these digital collections, right? We're not only looking at the text, we have this metadata. We know where does this paper publish, and we also know who are the authors for this paper. So you can tell for frequent pattern, they are more related to the KDE community now, and they are mostly published by those data mining researchers. And more recently, if you look at the transaction database, they are more dedicated to the database community. So you can tell from the metadata. So why not we can introduce the metadata here to help you to better understand this. And we already have some network constructed. So we can get some text-rich network here. So when we are figuring out all this meta information, some of them could be extracted from the documents. Some of them could be directly available from the digital collection itself, like the menus and authors. The terms are all extracted by AutoPhrase here. So we can construct a network like this, and we can view this input as a network. So let me introduce you something about the context for the network. So we already know how can we get a context from the text data, we can have a sliding window, and every word appeared in the sliding window will be our context. So similarly, we can use a motif pattern to define the subgraph context. So a motif pattern looks like this. So we have a schema level definition. We have two authors. They are linked to the same paper. The same paper has a term. And if there are two terms, social network and information cascade, they somehow match to they can be connected using these motif patterns by some instantiation. So like the John Kleinberg and Yuri Leskovic, these two are big names in data mining. And they have written two papers. One mentioned a social network, one mentioned information cascade. These two terms are connected by these two open-ended nodes here. Then we can say that these two terms could be similar, right? They share some context for the author pair, John Kleinberg and Yuri Leskovic. So this is the way we define the context. The contexts are defined by the nodes connecting two terms. So these are the contexts here. And we can generalize this motif pattern to many different cases. You can say if two terms appeared in the same paper, they are similar. You can also say if two terms are published in the same venue, they're similar. If two terms they're written by the same authors, they are similar. If two terms are published in a venue within a specific year range, it's even more similar, right? So all these things could be helpful for you to define a context. And the middle three here, they can be degenerated to a path connecting the two terms. So we're using this subgraph patterns. It contains the meta path as a special case. So when you are thinking about this embedding learning, right, we are going to learn the embedding not only based on the context from the text data, we are also going to use the metadata as a new context here. But not all the metadata will be helpful for your representation learning, right? If you look at these two cases, first, motif patterns are not created equal. Even we believe this venue and author pairs will be effective to figure out these topics, but they should be effective at different granularity. The author pair are supposed to be more effective when it goes to the fine-grained level. The venue will be more useful when you are just deciding the computer vision versus data mining, but it will be not that useful when you're looking at sentiment analysis versus entity recognition, right? They are already NLP topics. All NLP venues will have this information. And motif instances, even following the same motif pattern, they will be not equally informative. If we think about SegKDE and SegMod, the database venue is more focused. The data mining one is more broad. There are even some NLP papers there. So it will not be that equal in terms of the information these patterns carry over. So we proposed a method called NetTaxo. We will conduct an instance level motif selection. So in the very beginning, we just ignore all these motif instance. We will start with this term embedding. We just follow the taxonomy idea to do some clustering. But we realize that we have to admit that there will be some mistake in the first round of the clustering here, right? So how can we refine these clustering results? So we proposed some technique called comparative analysis. We are going to compare and contrast these clusters and then figure out which terms are the anchor phrase here. They are almost 100% sure belong to this cluster. And we don't need many of them. We just need 5 or 10 per cluster. So this will be our anchors for each cluster. And within this network structure, network context, we have these terms and different contexts, right? We can run some label propagation on this graph. And we will realize some of the contexts, they're very important for this clustering itself. And then we will select them and use this as additional context in the representation learning. We can refine the representation and hopefully frequent patterns and transaction database will be separated into two clusters in this embedding space. Then we rerun the clustering. We can rerun the comparative analysis. We can repeat this process for multiple iterations. But based on our observation, the first iteration is the most significant, and one iteration should be almost enough for most of the cases. So we will just run one iteration. After that, based on the clustering results, we are going to distribute the documents and the phrases into different clusters, and then we follow the top-down manner to do the recursion. So this is kind of the general framework for this NetTaxo. We designed the method based on our observations and try to find some selection to address this. So let me show you how effective the selection is. But before that, let's look at some example results. So in the first level, we will have this data mining, NLP, and machine learning things is quite good. And let's look at what other motif instances we have selected at this first level. At the first level, we simply count how many motif instances have been selected from each motif pattern. You will realize like the shared paper and shared author is not that useful. And shared venue and is the most important one. And author pair is also very telling. So you can tell like it's somehow effective, and it's actually implicitly select the motif patterns. If you provided some motif patterns that are not that relevant to this clustering process, we were not going to use much information from that pattern. If you think about the shared author and the shared paper, they are not that useful here just because one single author is not that useful. I myself published in many venues, but my focus is data mining, NLP, and machine learning. But if you pair me with one of my collaborator or one of my students, or maybe my advisor, then you can easily tell what is the research topic for that particular paper or term. So that's why author pair is significantly more useful than author. And we put these motif patterns here just to demonstrate that we can select the patterns as well. And if we dive deeper into the second level, it will be more interesting. So if you are looking at this NLP to sub areas, you can tell that we did some case study, picked the two of them, and then try to retrieve all their papers and do some counts for their frequent phrases. And then we realized that the first author pair is mainly working on sentiment analysis, and the second author pair, they are mostly working on machine translation. You can tell from these terms. And there's some interesting observation from the venue with year range. When we are diving deep into NLP, we realize there's a data mining venue here, CIKM, from this particular year. So we were surprised, and we are also not sure like whether our model is performing correct. So we did the same exercise. We retrieved the documents within this cluster from the CIKM within this period. And we realized the most frequent words here is actually very NLP, question answering, information extraction, sentiment analysis, knowledge base. So it's kind of telling you the overlap between the text mining and NLP, and there are some overlap here. And this CIKM value itself is a very strong indicator for these keywords, key phrases to be grouped together for a text mining cluster. So this is a good news. We identified some surprisingly good pattern here. So yeah, let's go back to the number of topics. Here in the topic taxonomy, we believe that for a large corpus, you only need to construct a topic taxonomy once in a short period. Maybe you need to rerun this pipeline 1 time a year. That could be enough. So we expect that the human expert will try different number of topics or decide the number of topics based on their prior knowledge. You can gradually increase the number of topics, and then at each layer, you can increase that from 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't think you need to try something beyond the 10. And you can eyeball the results and see which one gives you the most reasonable one. And in our experiments, we are fixing the number as 5 for all the branches. And we are doing the evaluation here. And this is a new task, and it's hard to do the evaluation because there's no universal taxonomy we are looking at. So we mainly evaluate this from 3 aspects. So in the ideal topic taxonomy, every node should have semantically coherent terms. And we are going to check whether this is correct for each node. And if you can observe a topic here, how many of them or what's the ratio here of these terms, they really belong to this topic. This becomes the coherence measure. The sibling exclusiveness basically tells you whether you will the human will be confused when you're looking at this taxonomy. If you are at a certain node and you have a few child nodes, some of them are really similar, then how can you know where you should go for the next navigation? So we are trying to mix up some of the terms together and try to ask the human expert to annotate which term do you believe is the outlier here. And we use this accuracy to describe the sibling exclusiveness. And as taxonomy, it's also important to have the right parent and child relationship. So we also did this annotation for all these possible edges, and we calculated the precision recall and F1. For the first 2, it's more like an accuracy score. So all this measurement will be between 0 and 1, the bigger the better. So we have a comparison between different methods on 2 data sets. One is called a DBOP5, another one is called a Yelp5. It's called 5 because we have the same number of topics as 5. And you can see that this HPen++ and TaxoGene, they are mainly using text data. This KCHIN++ is using network data. And we also have a very naive combination of the term embedding and the node embedding from this network structure and the text data together. And you can tell that our NetTaxo here performs the best for all the measurement. And it's very interesting to see that network and text data actually have different focus. You can see that the method based on the network will have a better performance in terms of the relationship here, the parent-child relationship. But with the text only, the relationship is not that strong. But the text data can give you a better sibling exclusiveness and the coherence. And our method, by combining them in a smart way with this selection, we can have a much better performance. Without this selection, sometimes you will get even worse performance compared with this TaxoGene, which tells you that the network information is not always useful. You must do some selection to make it effective. So that's kind of the takeaway from the experimental results here. So in summary, for the AutoNet part, before we discuss my ongoing work, it focused on automatically turning the unstructured text data into structured knowledge. And automatic here means we're using the public knowledge base only. The key here of this framework is that we harness the data redundancy from massive text corpus using statistical signals. This data-driven philosophy makes our AutoNet framework applicable in many domains and languages. And as I mentioned earlier, it has been applied in different industries and organizations ranging from high-tech, biomedical, and financial. And I have open sourced, I think, every piece of the work here on GitHub, either on my own repositories or in my collaborators' ones. And they are receiving thousands of stars and 100 forks so far. I think these numbers should be a couple of months before, and maybe we get more stars now. So I'd like to show you some demo before we will talk about something later. It was a demo delivered in KDE 18. So we constructed a network by analyzing, yeah, I think I screwed it up by clicking the wrong button. So we construct that network and we index the network in the backend, right? That's a PubMed paper network. So we can ask the user to upload their corpus, and this is the corpus, and after the phrase mining, we will highlight the phrase. After the entity recognition, we will get the entities using different colors. And then after the relation extraction, we can get all these relations between the entities. We can construct a small network here. And we can use this interface to do some navigation. You can mouse over to check the relationship. We will provide you some phrase cloud for the relationship. And we can also expand the knowledge here to retrieve more related information from the huge network we constructed from the whole PubMed papers. You can also keep clicking this expand until you feel you get enough knowledge here. So you can keep click that expand button to get more. Every time it will give you kind of 10-ish things from a browse first search. And you can also type some keywords to search, and we will provide a link back to PubMed. Like if you type the headache, we will get all its related concepts. And you can click the link back to the document that mentions this headache. And I hope during this COVID pandemic season, you will not have headache. This could be a part of the symptom you don't want to have. So that's kind of the idea for the AutoNet part. And let me talk about some ongoing work or accepted work recently, give you some high-level idea. So one of the new work we have is this UC phrase. UC is, of course, UC San Diego's UC, but it's also unsupervised and context-aware phrase tagging. So we submitted this to a top conference. It's under review. I cannot talk too much, but I can tell you something, the key ideas. We're using the maximum frequent pattern mining to generate silver labels for free. We are no longer using the knowledge base. We can derive these labels from the sentences directly. And we can train a neural network model for this tagging purpose. And there's some interesting observation we had from the neural network. If you're using those contextualized representation for this tagger training, very likely you will have some overfitting to the silver label, and you won't go beyond the silver label itself. And we realized that the attention map is actually a great source here, because from the attention map, you actually don't know what are these words. You cannot identify the words from the attention map itself, but you know their connection. And their connection is the focus we want to have for the phrase mining. So if we train the model from the attention map, it will not easily overfit the silver label we have, and it can generalize much better. And we actually compared this method with AutoPhrase, and it outperforms AutoPhrase significantly because it can capture those infrequent emergent phrases. For the AutoPhrase, you need a minimum support threshold to establish the statistical signals. Without that enough amount of the frequency, you cannot recognize the phrases using AutoPhrase. So that's kind of one of the motivation we have for this UC phrase, and we hope it could be accepted soon, and we can release the tool on GitHub as well. And we also have an unsupervised deep key phrase generation. So from the phrase mining tools, it's very good in terms of the extraction. If the phrase is there in this article, we can extract that easily. But when we're generating the key phrases, we are trying to understand the articles. We also wish that we can get some insights from the generative perspective. It could be some phrase that never appeared in this article as a whole, but we want to generate the phrase. So that's kind of the key phrase generation. And in the past, it's mostly done in a supervised way. You want to have some article and the key phrase, and then you train a sequence-to-sequence model to do this generation. But now we propose a new method called unsupervised deep key phrase generation. We are putting together a phrase bank to generate absent phrases as silver labels. We are getting all the extracted phrase together from all different articles, and then we apply some rules to add some absent key phrases for each document. If this information system is there in this sentence, every token separately, we can assume information system itself is related to this article. Silver means, so in NLP, gold means it's annotated. Silver means it's machine generated. So there's no guarantee that these silver labels are always correct, but we assume the majority of them should be correct. And we are trying to learning from these silver labels to generate more accurate things. And we will have a tailored sequence-to-sequence model to run generation. And hopefully we can get those absent key phrases generated as well. So that's kind of the idea for this unsupervised deep key phrase generation. And we have a recent work accepted to the NACO 21st. It was just notified last week. And the paper itself is already there on archive before we submit to NACO. And the code is also available in the GitHub. This is the work I've done with my student here at UCSD. We are conducting the text classification with the class name only. So imagine that you have millions of news articles, and you know some of them about politics, some of them about sports, some of them about economics. You just throw these label names to us, then we can do the classification for you. This is kind of a magic, and the performance is actually very high, very close to 90% accuracy in many data sets. So we are only using the class names here as a supervision. That's why it's called extremely weak. So you may wonder why it's called extremely. It's weak, but why it's extremely weak? Because this is almost the minimal supervision we can imagine. For the news articles, you can classify them based on topics. You can also classify them based on sentiment. You can also classify them based on the location of this news event. So there are multiple criteria. So it's almost impossible for you to do this classification in an unsupervised way. So you have to give me some hint. And we believe this class name is the minimum amount of the hint you should give me. So that's why we call it extremely weak. That's why it's called X class. X denotes extremely weak. So this method will work well when the class name are different for the same corpus. It will also work well when the class name only appeared once in the input corpus. This is a very strong once. Would there exist something for the documents? Is there a good way to deal with it? I'm not quite sure if I understand the question. Do you want to elaborate a little more? And feel free to unmute yourself if that's easier.
I think, Jingbo, I think the question is about like if this was done on a corpus of documents instead of news articles, would that work probably? I think that is what I understood.
What's the difference between the corpus and the documents?
Like basically, like imagine DBpedia. It has a bunch of short paragraphs, but yes, you don't specify the topic or the class. But then means I think the person who's asking the question wanted like if this method would work on any kind of generalized documents.
Oh yes,
instead of news articles.
Yes. So we do have a data set called the DBpedia, and we tested that as well. In this paper, we conducted very extensive experiments using, let me see, I forgot, it's 8 or 9 data sets for the evaluation. And we covered the sentiment analysis, news topic classification, and also the scientific article classification like things, or Wikipedia article things.
So my question is, in the class names for the news articles, what could be the class names? Are they going to be like topics like politics, sports, or could it be sentiments also?
Could be like for sentiment, you can provide, you can tell from this figure, you can provide happy for positive, sad for negative. That's the only thing you need to provide.
I mean to say, let's say if I have a bunch of news articles,
yes,
would I specify topics of the articles, or would I specify sentiments? Or at least, I mean to say the class names have to be of one kind, right?
Yeah, you can specify any. We do have cases that for the same set of corpus, we have different classification criteria, and we can accommodate that as long as you specify the meaningful class name.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, you can even give us a class name, say Republic versus Democrats, and we can try to give a shot, but I don't know how accurate it will be because we never tested this on this. But theoretically, it should work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, So this is our recent work. Feel free to try it out and report any bug or you are not happy with the results. And we also have some ongoing work to further improve this. So in the end, I'd like to acknowledge all my collaborators from both academia and industry and the funding agencies who have supported our research, both during my PhD study and also currently at UC San Diego. And in summary, we already have covered the AutoNet and some ongoing work. And the key idea here is we want to turn the unstructured text data into knowledge and insights using minimum amount of human effort. The minimum amount of human effort could be public knowledge base, could be unsupervised, could be some seed words or class names provided by the human experts. So yeah, I think that's the end of the talk, and I'm happy to take more questions.
Very cool stuff. Thank you so much, Jingbo. I really love the work, and I think for me it totally resonates that we're not going to be able to do supervised learning on all of these things, and so I think it makes for a very interesting focus for your research.
Yeah, especially if you think about as a human, when you are asked to do the annotation, what are the instructions you have? You basically know the class name and the entity type. You don't need too much hand holding, right? Except for some corner cases. Like if you see an article talking about two topics at the same time, what should we do? If you see some ambiguous entities, what should we do? So I believe without these annotations, just some hints, like the annotation instructions, the machine should be able to do something with a fairly good performance. And then for the corner cases, of course, we need some more hand-holding from the human expert to tell us like what to do exactly. That could be ambiguous for human expert too. But before we reach that stage, we definitely want to find some weakly supervised or unsupervised method to get all these things done. Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, and I saw a question here. Does it use references associated code, store the data things not in the text, but linked directly to text? Yeah, that's a very interesting future work we can do. In the X class, we are sticking with the text data only. And as you can see, you probably can visit my publication list. We do have some method leveraging the metadata, just like the NetTaxo here. We migrated the idea from the taxonomy construction to classification too. We can definitely borrow the structure information to help the classification task as well.
Hey, Jingbo, can you go back to the slide which the paper you submitted, which you slightly talked about, actually back? Yeah. So this one, what's the main goal of this one in this paper, in this one?
So there are, the final outcome is a tagger. It's a model that you can directly use. It's a pre-trained one. We believe the phrase is somehow transferable between different domains. And if you don't want to train the tagger, then you can use our pre-trained tagger. And the tagger will basically tells you like, you give me an input for a sentence, I tell you where are the phrases with the index offset.
Okay. Is this like already on archive, this one? Because I want to read a little bit more about this one. Or is it?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not on archive because we submitted it to a conference that it doesn't allow us to post on archive.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, but I can tell you how did we evaluate this. We evaluated this from 3 tasks. The first one is the same as phrase mining, the rank list of the phrases. Right, and we can have a score between 0 and 1 for all these phrases. The second one is actually related to this key phrase generation. So we look at the scientific papers and the news articles. How can we generate, how can we extract, because this one is the extractive method. How can we extract the key phrases? We only evaluate those present key phrases. And there's a third task similar to the NER. We ignore the type, but we focus on the spans where we identify the right span, whether we identify the right span for phrases. So we calculate the precision record and F1. So based on our evaluation, AutoPhrase is very good in terms of the ranking because it has so many popular phrases ranked very high. So we are not beating the AutoPhrase in the ranking task. We are performing roughly the same, but not better. But when it goes to a finer and a finer granularity, when we look at the document level, sentence level evaluation, this method has much better performance than those corpus level extractive method.
So I have a task where, getting you have e-commerce descriptions of for different products. And you want to basically get the brand out of it. I have a feeling like the AutoPhrase could work well to get the the key brand if it exists. Sometimes what happens is that some titles may not have the brand. They might just say a set of folders, for example, but doesn't give you any kind of key brand phrase. So I have a feeling like the AutoPhrase could work in that, like extracting that thing. So maybe I'll read up more on that, from your what you have discussed today.
Yeah, definitely. And for AutoPhrase, it's open source. We have a very long README file. Try to read that. And we also have a Docker container if you want to set up the environment easily. And one tip is that when you are applying AutoPhrase to your own data set, we have a knowledge base, right? We have a built-in one from Wikipedia. So sometimes you will have your specific knowledge base, right? You already know some of the key brand name. You can append that list to the Wikipedia list. It's really a TXT file with all the phrase, one phrase in one line. You can append your phrase there in the end. It can also improve the performance. So
it's basically kind of like a transfer learning. Basically, you're appending. I can append my phrase to the.
Yes. And it will run on your corpus, and your corpus are supposed to be large enough. If your corpus is not large enough, try to find some additional ones. Like we don't need annotation, right? So that's a good news. So you just need to find some documents that's similar to your input.
Okay, I'll try it out. The other question was, you talked about term embedding.
Yes.
I have extensively used Google's universal sentence encoders. So is it similar to that? Does it give a vectorized format for term or like phrase embedding? Like I think you talked about two things, phrase embedding and term embedding.
Yeah.
So
these two terms are roughly exchangeable, I would say. So when we are doing these things, so we have the phrase mining technique, right? We use this as a pre-processing. And I showed you earlier that after the phrase mining, we can segment the sentence into pieces. We have the phrases and the unigrams, right? So one trick we can play is you can replace the white space within the phrase, the two words within the phrase by an underscore. And you feed this pre-processed input to the what2vect code. You can easily get the representation for each phrase. You don't need to pass that to a sentence encoder. You just get the entire phrase from its context.
Okay. And are you saying the phrase will contain only two words, like a bigram?
It could be multi-words. There's a hyperparameter you can set in AutoPhrase, the script. The default, we can go up to 6 words in the phrase. And for some biomedical people, when they are applying our method, they will increase that to 10 or 12 because after the tokenization, they realize the phrase in their domain will be segmented into different ones. So it only depends on like what's your expectation for the phrase, and also do you want to run longer? Because when that parameter goes longer, your candidate set pool will be larger.
Yeah. So you're saying if let's say there are 2 words in a phrase, I join them using an underscore, and then I give it to any standard word-to-vec model like glove or something.
Yeah, exactly. And you will get the phrase embedding, and you will realize the phrase embedding is quite good, just like the word embedding.
So can I still, as I told you, I've worked extensively with universal sentence encoders. Can I still give it with the underscore thing to like a universal sentence encoder kind of model? Because that's very, easy to actually code in terms of like, I've done stuff where I've done, sentence classification using like, 2D CNNs. And actually, I've done some work with, using semi-supervised sentence classification using VAT. So, the VAT technique, the virtual adversarial training technique. Yes. So I was thinking like that phrase embedding, can you put it to a universal sentence encoder kind of like transformer network?
Yeah, you can. So here, in this work, I strongly recommend you to try this out if you're working on sentence classification. This work works for short sentence, short paragraph very well. And you can provide a multi-words for the class name as well, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, we are using the transformer to get the encoding for these things.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely, I like this one. I'll definitely look at this X class, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Google X class, but add my name there will be easier because if you directly Google X class, I believe it will give you some Mercedes vehicles.
Yeah, okay, sure. Thank you.